This country started out as an agricultural country. Essentially, the productivity of agriculture back in the 19th century and before was such that it took about one farmer or one farm family for each family in the United States in order to create the food that was necessary to live. What has happened in our agricultural productivity is that the productivity of an individual farm has increased to the point that we're now up to somewhere around one farmer is needed for something like each 40 families in the United States. What this says is that we just haven't got enough demand for agricultural production at that level for everybody to be able to make their living as a farmer. The real difficulty facing the small farmers today is that they must expand their farms if they're to remain in farming. Some of these farmers have been able to grow more easily than others. Bill Hughes and his family have worked this farm a long, long time. But now they've got to expand, and it's not going to be easy.
My grandfather was born on the farm and served in Civil War. After the Civil War, he moved to South Dakota for several years, returning here in 1889 and purchasing another farm a few miles away where my father was born. And he returned to this, the original farm, and where I was born, and I've lived here ever since. We have a trailer across the road from my mother and father's house where my wife and I live with our children. We rent the farm from them. We own a 2-acre plot of ground where our trailer is, and hoping to buy the farm someday.
Is the vet coming today?
Well, I guess he's coming today. He called last night and said he'd try to get over.
Basically, the problem is that we have to get bigger to survive, and there's a lot of obstacles in the way of doing that. We have to set up our priorities in whether we're going to buy additional land or try to rent that land.
Well, we're pleased that our son wants to take over the farm. We only have 2 grandchildren. I guess if he didn't want to farm it, we would probably sell it, try to find another young farmer who would buy it on a contract or something in order to keep it in land use.
It's very important that we have additional land in relation to what we own ourselves or rent from my in-laws, because we need to have enough pasture and enough cropland in order to feed the cows that we have now.
Renting the additional land allows us to keep the 45 cows and 40 head of young stock. With further improvements on the rented land, we will be able to go to 60 cows and 40 or more head of young stock.
Well, we're really cramped for space, and we really couldn't pack another cow into our barn. It's just kind of bursting at the seams.
A new barn would probably run in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000 all built. We have to build the things before we can become more efficient. Well, the land developers have practically doubled and even tripled the price of land in the area, and it's made it completely out of the reach of people who have to work the land to make a living off of it.
People have given up. They got mighty poor prices for the product, and they sell off a piece here and a piece there for city folks come in and buy the land. They like to come here where it's quiet and clean and peaceful.
An important resource person for farmers, and for our farm in particular, are county extension agents. We've had the agents come and visit and talk about buying farms on contract. We've talked about how to keep records for the farm. They help us with testing our soil And it's a resource for the farmers to improve what they're doing with their animals and their land.
In the Hughes family situation, they are one of the last farms in the area. And their biggest problems at the present time, I would say, are going to be the availability of some of the services that they need to operate that farm. For example, it's very difficult to get a veterinarian into the area. Those that are available travel a long, long distance, and when they get there, there are not many other farms to also go visit while they are there. That's one of the pressures that is upon them.
This is the reason I bought the helicopter in '61, because I always imagined if I could just fly over the top of the next hill, I could get to the farm in just a few minutes. Whereas driving around, for instance, coming down here to Bill's, it takes 30, 40 minutes of fast driving. The main problem I have now, I think, within the last maybe 10 years since the family farms have been disappearing, is distance. They cover such an enormous distance. I don't think that it needs routine antibiotics at all. I'd rather not use antibiotics unless you absolutely have to. It's a rugged job. It's 24-hour duty, and I had this whole area for myself since I practiced within the last few years. But there's still a lot of gratification in being able to serve these people that need help, and I think that's maybe where I get my reward.
Does it eat what you give it?
Well, sometimes it doesn't clean up its milk.
How much milk are you giving it? Routinely.
About 5 pounds.
But some of these people, some of these young people, some of these farmer boys, farmer girls too. In fact, I have a lot of women that do just as good a job as farming as the men do. In fact, I would say better.
Supplemental vitamin, mineral.
And of course, you can see on this farm here, they all work together. They have to work together. It's always been this way.
Essentially, what's happening is that we're having a tremendous decline in small farms. I can tell you that in this county, during the first 6 months of the year, we have had a decline of approximately 40 to 45 farms. Actually, the interesting thing is that in farms of 50 cows or more, there is actually an increase throughout the United States. Chuck Benson's farm here is an example of a farm that has continued to grow ever since it began.
We've been buying land and adding on cows. I know my dad has been expanding ever since he started. We have numbers for all of them, and they're definitely not pets. You might even say they were machines. As it turns out, a cow, when she's treated the best and is content in every way, she'll give her most milk. She'll be at her best as far as production. So we treat them very well, but we certainly don't regard them as pets. They're a business, money maker. Well, we're presently milking in a 4-stall crossover parlor. This milks about 40 cows an hour, and right now it's taking us with 160 cows a little over 4 hours to milk. We're trying to speed this up, or we are speeding this up, by building another parlor very similar to the one we have, and putting another man in that to cut down on the time that we actually spend milking the cows. This will free up the labor force for whatever we have to be doing, whether it's harvesting or planting crops. The old method of keeping cows was in a stanchion barn, and this had the cows locked in each individual stall, and all the feed was brought to them. The new system is called the freestall barn, and this has a number of stalls in it that have no restraints in them of any kind. The cow only goes in when she wants to lay down and rest. Otherwise, she's walking around on the cement slab. She goes to a bunk where it's convenient for us to dump in the feed by an automatic dump wagon. And we don't spend a lot of time taking feed to individual cows. It's just everything is speeded up because we don't have to mess around going around each cow. She comes to us instead.
I know one thing that impressed me a lot was that each animal is worth quite a bit of money. And when one or many cows get out, no matter what time of day it is, we have to go chase them, make sure they don't get on the road, and bring them back to the barn because they're worth $500 to $1,000.
And I know a number of people have come up, some Andrew's relatives from around New York, and people that aren't connected with it, and they're just, they say, you actually make a living at this. I mean, you earn money and you don't have to work at something else. And they just don't think of it as a business.
You have to borrow money at times for improvements you want to make, land to buy, but you have to be very, very careful to be sure that when you borrow the money, you're going to be able to pay it back by making the improvements to make more money to pay it back. I don't like to be in debt. I don't like to owe anybody money.
I think we'll always be in the situation of investing other people's capital or borrowing money, however you want to put it. And I think we'll have to be that way just to keep ahead with the mechanization. As I said, this piece here was quite expensive. The actual debt on the farm is about $100,000, and we don't actually worry about that as a debt hanging over our heads. It's invested capital, just like in any other business. What we look at is our equity, or what we own over what we owe, and that is now it's well over 50%, and it's growing. And as long as that's the case, we figure that's healthy.
There is machinery I would like to buy. I'd like to have a new disc, which would increase my ability to till the ground. A new disc is about $2,500, the model that I would like, and at the moment I can't afford an expensive piece of machinery.
This is our most expensive piece of machinery because we harvest everything with it. The whole set is probably close to $40,000. The alfalfa comes in with this. It's chopped up as haylage. And the corn silage also comes in with this, and the high moisture corn. The farm is becoming more and more mechanized, but instead of cutting down on the labor, we're putting on more cows, and so we have to be able to get more and more feed for the cows, and there's more to take care of for the herdsmen.
There's sometimes 10-hour days, and sometimes there's 20-hour days. It is dependent on what you're doing at the time, but mostly they're long, 12, 14 hours or more a day.
In the family farm situation, if it requires 15 hours a day to get the job done, you put it in. Or if the cow or the sheep is going to calve or lamb at 3 o'clock in the morning, the farmer or a member of his family gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning and goes out and tends to her. On a corporate industrial type of structure, which you get in many of these situations where non-farm corporations have come into agriculture, you put the time clock on the wall and you punch in and you punch out. And you work your 8 hours, and when you're done, you leave and you go home. In California, there are a number of very large farms, 3,000 and 4,000 cows per farm. And a lot of those are conglomerates, kind of big corporations, but some of them are individually owned, family operations. They're operated a lot different than we do here in the East. They're actually just milk factories. I wouldn't enjoy that type of farming because I wouldn't enjoy milking that much. I suppose I'd have that work done for me if I had that many cows. But also, part of the appeal to me of this type of farming is that I am outside a lot, and each season brings quite a change in the type of work I do.
Farmers like to be independent, but I think that they really need to work together. I don't think that there's really a way for a farmer now to market his milk unless he were a member of a co-op. Really, these are the people who come and pick up our milk, deliver it to the milk plant, come up with the ideas for marketing, take it to the stores and sell it. And I can't see that, any of us are ready to go out on our own. Maybe the bigger farmer, who can have his own dairy right there at the farm and can hire his truck drivers and do his marketing, that's fine, but not for us.
The need for some government action in the area of milk prices came about because, first of all, keep in mind you have an extremely perishable product. Compare it with, let's say, wheat. You can put the wheat in the bin and you can hold it, and you can hold it for a considerable period of time, something over a year if need be. Milk has to go to the plant presently every 2 days, or it just won't keep. That's, I think, obvious to the housewife as well as to the dairy farmer. It's a highly perishable product.
If the milk isn't pasteurized within about 48 hours, there is a fat enzyme that starts breaking down the fat and causing a rancid flavor. And because of certain labor union rules in New York City, they won't handle milk that's pasteurized. It has to be what they call crude, and they pasteurize it in the city. Which would be all right if they would do it right away, but too many times they wait and hold the milk in a crude state because there's a lot of milk on the market, on the shelves in the grocery store, and it has a certain shelf life. So then they'll, after the milk's been whole for quite a few days, then they'll pasteurize it and put it on the shelf, but the fat enzymes already started to work, so that the children get to taste milk that's rancid, and then they grow up not liking milk. And this doesn't help us at all because we don't have a market if the children, have a dislike for milk, and then as adults won't drink it either.
The government uses exports as a tool to get their own way in various countries throughout the world. Because if people want the food, they're going to have to pay for it one way or another, and the farmer is used and his product is used. You're either told to produce more or told to produce less, and it just seems that you're pretty much of a political football.
Oh, the environmental impact legislation now is another thing it's starting, I think, to get a little out of hand. Let's say the Wetlands Act. A number of streams will pass through farms, and they have to be cleaned out regularly, or the bottom eventually fills in, and it causes a tremendous flooding problem on a lot of tillable land where a lot of crops are grown. And under this legislation, that stream couldn't be touched because you would be disturbing a natural resource. We have two fellows that work for us, and I don't like to call them hired men. That kind of refers back to the old idea of a fellow that worked on the farm. He had a strong back, and he was willing to do any back-breaking task and not complain too much, and that was all the talent that was needed. But now everything's becoming more and more mechanized, and it requires somebody with a few specialized skills. Operates machinery and repairs it. He originally was an ag mechanics teacher. He did teach school for a year, and I guess decided that he liked this better. We hired Ed about 3 months ago as a herdsman. His job would be to take care of the herd, and he watches the breeding chart to make sure they're all getting bred on time, so we don't have a lot of dry cows just eating feed and not giving milk. He watches them for any sickness they might need the veterinary for, and handle some of the treatment himself. There's only 4 people here running. Probably a $600,000 operation, and you aren't going to have these people taken up with tasks like shoveling out a stall with a pitchfork or something like that.
Well, Brian, my son, means a great deal to us as far as being able to work the farm. He's 17 and able now to do much of the milking on his own. Bill has trained him very well. And he's going to be graduating from high school this year. And right now our farm supports 2 families because my in-laws are here also. A hired man would again mean someone probably with a family, and we really couldn't afford another family right now.
They couldn't afford like a hired hand because, well, his mom puts it on cheap labor. I stay here and live here and go to school, and I only make $60 a month, but, I don't have that much to spend my money on, so it's plenty for me at this point in my life. We want to expand and get bigger through the years. If I stay around here, we can do it sooner than, like if I went to college, it would be 2 years.
Brian has to make up his own mind about what he wants to do. I want to expand the farm and make it possible for him to stay here if he wants to do that. But I also want to make it as easy as possible for him to go away somewhere else if he decides to do that. I don't want to have him obligated and feel that he has to stay here because I want him to or his mother wants him to.
You can't get anybody to come and work unless you pay them a high salary, and the farm margin of profit just isn't high enough to afford to pay a hired man union wages, let's say, today. The family farm, therefore, is disappearing. As young people grow up, they leave to go to the city where they think they're going to get good pay, and the old man and old lady are left with the farm.
Yes, I think expansion is the only way we can go if we really want to continue to be a farm family. We have other choices, but I don't think we want to make those choices.
I think the reasons that Bill and Linda stay there on that farm is that, first of all, there are very close family ties to that piece of real estate, that farm. And not everybody in this world works solely to make as much money as they possibly can. And I think that's the case here.
We had to decide whether it was more important for us to make a fantastic living and, you know, try to reach the ideal, or whether we should just put people as more important in our life and our family and our roots and you know, what we have behind us to work with. And I think we struggled a lot with the decision, and I'm kind of glad that we made the one we did and that I'm here.
I really enjoy working with animals, growing crops, and feeding my cows and watching the cows give milk. You have to have something to hang on to. You have to like the work that you're doing.